Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, everything in the universe is based on trust, may it be independence of states or growth of economy. When we talk about economic growth, the most important factor is human, the social capital. And the relation between the social capital and economic growth is inevitable. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the thing, the relationship is based on tolerance, harmony, and trust. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the topic of our third panel discussion of AGM 33rd, Social Capital and Economic Growth, Tolerance, Harmony, and Trust. I would like to call on stage the honorable guest, the chairperson for the session, Ms. Naela Chohan. She is High Commissioner for Pakistan to Australia. She has worked in various capacities with Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ma'am, please. The panelists for the session are Izhar Ali Hunza. He has research and practical expertise in strategic planning and policy dialogue. He has worked as CEO of AKRSP. He has served with many international organizations in senior management positions. We have with us Dr. Asma Hyder. She is a labor economist and member of social sector in planning. She has taught at NUST, IB, and Carleton University, Canada. Dr. Vilayat VALIYEV, he is heading Research Center of Economic Cooperation Organization in Azerbaijan. He has held major positions in Economic Council of Azerbaijan. He is writer of numerous research papers and books. Sir, please. We have with us Mr. Pervez Tahir. He is a senior economist, writer, and speaker. He has served Planning Commission as chief economist and secretary. Currently, he is CEO of Bank of Punjab, sir. Shortly, we'll have with us Mr. Max Lawson through Skype. He is head of advocacy and public policy in OXFAM. I would request Ma'am Naela Chohan to please begin the session.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. It seems that there's a strong bias against bureaucracy because my introduction has been only that I've been in different offices in the Foreign Office, nothing about other things that I have done. But never mind, thank you so much. Dr. Asad Zaman, distinguished panelists, both national and foreign, my beautiful young people, the students and the teachers, you're all very young. I would at the very outset like to commend the Pakistan Society of Development Economists and to Dr. Asad Zaman for choosing the theme, firstly the total theme, which is redefining prosperity paths in changing global economy, opportunities and challenges for Pakistan, which indeed is the need of time. Personally, it is a great privilege for me to chair today's session on social capital and economic growth, tolerance, harmony, and trust. In last 2 days that you have been attending these sessions, we have heard distinguished panelists, speakers on various aspects of redefining prosperity and on economic growth. But the most important, which I would say the elephant in the room, and according to Dr. Asad, the blind spot, is the social capital. And I'm glad that we are doing it at the near end of the annual conference of PSDE, because now that you have heard various economists and scholars and writers talking about the issues, all of them have alluded to it, but not really pointed out the elephant in the room. the social capital, tolerance, harmony, and trust. And how does it affect our economic growth? And how do we need to redefine it? In my view, this is the most important session, and I'm privileged to have such distinguished speakers. I will not stand between you and them, but I would say that today's session will indeed make you think of how do we redefine this path to prosperity, how do we bring Pakistan to where it needs to be, where it merits. So I would like to first start with Dr. Izhar Ali Hunza. Sorry.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Chair. As you said, this is the crux of the matter, the social capital and its relationship with Pakistan's development, the development of our economy, our nation, our society. There are many highly educated, accomplished people, researchers in this session, in this room. I will only bring my short experience of working with the Aga Khan Rural Support Program and how we understood the social capital that was there or is there out there in our communities throughout Pakistan, and how it is or it can be nurtured, channeled, and given direction to achieving not only community development, but also building trust and harmony, as is the part of the theme today. We started in 1983, way back, and it was a time when the Karakoram Highway was just built. His Highness the Aga Khan, who is currently visiting Pakistan, brought together eminent economists, development experts from all over the world. And he asked them, here is a case of a very remote mountain area which has remained isolated for centuries. And now a road is being built. How can we do something that will internalize the benefits of this highway for the people of this remote area? The reason why I am mentioning this is that we are going through a similar opportunity in the form of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. You can build roads, you can build infrastructure, you can build mega projects, you can integrate FATA into KP, you can do all kinds of things, but you need to do your homework. You need to really find out, do research, and understand the implications of investment projects, mega investment projects. So they recommended a name, Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan. Everybody said, look, this person knows what you're talking about. So when Dr. Akhtar Hamid Khan was contacted, he identified a person called Shoaib Sultan Khan. Okay? So Shoaib Sultan Khan was tracked down. He was working somewhere in Sri Lanka. So he was contacted and he was brought. He was working for UNICEF at that time. So he was interviewed by His Highness the Aga Khan and said, look, I want to do this. And he said, Your Highness, why are you hiring me? I'm not an Ismaili. I'm not an Aga Khani. I'm a secular person. So he said, look, I need exactly a type of person that you are, because I need to build social capital and you are the person who knows how to do it. So he was brought. Qissa Mukhtasar, Shoaib Sahab came to Gilgit in a, Pervez Sahab knows the whole story as well. So in a cold winter, December day, maybe it was 14th of December or something similar to today, and he introduced very simple principles. Tanzeem, Bachat, Hunar. three forms of capital. Social capital in the form of tanzeem, hunar, human capital, and bachat, financial capital. Let's start with financial capital. Why we need financial capital? In the whole world, the model, even today, is credit-driven investment. The whole world. AKRSP started with savings-driven investment. And it's very much related to Islamic finance as well, which is now being realized as an important form of social capital and financial capital together. So small communities, individuals started saving money, and at some point their capital was 10 years, 15 years down the road, was worth $10 million at that time. So then this led to creation of, we went to lobbied and did all kinds of policy advocacy with the state bank, because there was no regulation for microfinance at that time. So state bank was very kind, or the governor state bank came to Gilgit, and when he saw the people were saving money and doing internal lending with each other without exploitation and in full view of everybody, he said, look, this is illegal. You can't take money and distribute. You know, this is illegal, but this is a very good illegal thing. So later on, it was then had to be formalized. And the Aga Khan Foundation established the first microfinance bank. Today, there are 36 microfinance banks, and this microfinance sector is organized. What I'm saying is that social capital works in conjunction with other forms of capital, with financial capital, with human capital. So we started human capital by asking communities to identify technical, vocational skills, needs, livestock, agriculture, financial management, accounting. All these disciplines were identified and people were trained. People from the communities were trained, and they went back and they provided these services to the community. So the human capital started to take shape. Once this was done, the social capital became like crystallized. And then where people were able to identify their small projects, physical capital came into being. Then they started planting forest trees. The natural capital started, they started developing water management for irrigation. So with these three core capitals, social capital, human capital, and financial capital, other forms of capital also became prominent. And later at some point, the World Bank did an evaluation of AKRSP, and they formalized this concept into 5 capitals for rural development: human capital, social capital, financial capital, physical capital, natural capital. So what I'm saying is that social capital is out there in our communities, but it needs to be mobilized, and it needs to be organized, and it needs to be channelized. Now, if we just say that social capital is good, that will not solve our problems. There are all types of social capital. In one of the sessions today, there was a discussion that social capital itself can be negative as well. Like you have jirgas, that's a form of social capital. But without knowledge, without direction, without investment, that can be harmful. People can use the social capital for negative externalities, and that needs to be taken care of. So one has to be consciously aware of how you build social capital to support national development, community development, and build harmony and build prosperity for the countries. I think I have used up my time, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Izhar Ali Hunza. He has raised some very interesting points. He has not specifically dwelt on the social capital, but linked it with other forms as well, which is human capital, financial capital, and social capital. But if you have heard the earlier speakers also, since the 2 days of conference, you would realize that a lot of scholars here have spoken of working in silos, that institutional linkages are not as strong, And then trust in government organizations is also not that strong. So I think social capital in its own merit also is very important. Izhar Ali Hunza has spoken of the negative aspects, but I'm confident there are many positive aspects. I would now like to invite Dr. Asma Hyder to elaborate her views. Thank you.
Dr. Asad Zaman, Ms. Naela Chohan, panelists, students, colleagues, and friends. Assalamu alaikum. First, I think we must appreciate our economists because since long they are trying to understand the growth process. And they are working hard. They are working really, really hard, but still they are in the middle of the process and they have to go a long way. And since last few years, the complexity of our societies are increasing because number one, the increase in number of agents and institutions and entities in our society, and also because of the relationship between these agents. The literature on economic development and sociology clearly shows that social capital is important driving factor behind the economic growth of societies. Thus, the different economic agents like individuals, firms, households, institutions, businesses, also many other variables which we always consider in the growth process like investment, saving, human capital, the stock of human capital in the society, employment, etc. are the important, but to understand the growth process, we need to look into the relationship between all these variables and between these entities, which this relationship is very complex and very complex indeed. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge the contribution of Robert Putnam in this concept, particularly in his work on making the democracy work. He actually throws very light on this particular topic and explain that how the social capital helps in the development process. He worked on Italy, that how the two regions in Italy, if we have the equal stock of capital in terms of human capital and the resources, how it makes a difference if there is a different level of social capital, for instance, trust particularly, and some other variables. Which I'm going to discuss as well. And then, in general, the social capital include the institution, the relationship, the attitude, values, and beliefs that govern the institution among people and contribute to economic and social development. So since this is a very complex thing, there are three levels, I think, of the social capital. The first is the micro level of social capital, which exists within the network of individuals and households. This level of social capital is bridging and bonding relation between family members, friends, and neighbors. This concept is somehow close to the idea presented by Grenovetter, presented in 1970s in his work, like the strength of weak ties, that how our set of information increases when we interact with the friends of friends. For instance, A and B are friends, so they have a common set of information. And B and C are friends, and A interact with the C, then the set of information will increase. So this is basically the strength of weak ties, because the tie between A and C is quite weak. So this type of social capital or relationship between individuals is very important and have very important implication on labor market, particularly in job search, for instance, and many other things. Then comes the second level of social capital, which is interaction between the bigger entities, like interaction between firms. Thus, the trust and relationship between organization and firms, the collective action between entities that help to pool their resources, to share ideas and new technologies, to cooperate and better outcome and development. This type of social capital helps to facilitate research and development network. The final type of social capital, that is between institution at a larger scale, for instance, the social and political environment, or the relationship between judiciary and political institution and other governing bodies, which help to develop the social architecture of the economy or society. This type of social capital not only explains the development process, but also the prosperity, interfaith harmony, and among between the different groups, and of course, it also explains the economic growth. Now, for instance, the relationship between the Higher Education Commission and the government, the relationship between the research institution and the different government institutions, for instance, Planning Commission, the universities and industries and businesses and the private sector. So this type of relationship is at a larger scale, which is between institutions. Now, the complexity lies that these are not only the three levels, but the complexity is into the horizontal and the vertical approach. So it's within these at their own level and also across the level. So this makes even this phenomena more complex. Now there are some question marks how to measure the social capital in society. So for researchers, they are trying to measure it through different methods or variables. First important thing is the membership. That if we just look into ourselves, if you ask myself that how many memberships I have for different societies, for different clubs, for different associations, maybe very, very few, and it's same with most of the people in our society. So if we can measure the memberships, the scope of the measures of the sports clubs, for instance, of different institutions, and yesterday's talk, I think, was already elaborated on that. Dr. Nadimul Haq in his lecture, and later on in the discussion, it was discussed that networks are very, very important, and especially the memberships are important as well. And the second, and now one can ask a question that there is no such space like sports clubs or community center or libraries. So what they can do. So now the role of the government is very important in this perspective to build the architecture, the physical architecture of the communities and residential areas in a way that they should provide an opportunity to build the social capital so that the individuals can meet at certain places. And then another important variable is the trust, which is also very important. The trust, which can be used to measure the social capital, and usually in literature it is measured through different surveys, and which is and another index is the civic index. So before at the end, before finishing, I would like to share one of my own work with my PhD student at IBA. This is not basically focused on. This is not focused on social capital. Rather, the main focus of this paper was well-being. But one part of this project deal with the trust as well. So I'm not going to show the other variables, the other controls in this, but we actually try to look into that if people have trust in the parliament, how much it increases their well-being, and the trust in judiciary. So you can see that if I start from the end, the last model, that is the technical governance. So technical governance is basically, in this perspective, is the quality of roads, whether the government provide the employment or not, they have safe drinking water or not, they have the paved road or not. So these are the questions through which we develop an index. So you can see that such type of things are important, no doubt. But if the people have the trust in judiciary or trust in the parliament, it increases their well-being or the level of satisfaction. So this is basically, this work is done, the data is collected throughout from the Pakistan with the help of the State Bank. And so we came up with these results that these things significantly affect the well-being or the level of satisfaction of the people. So with these words, I would like to conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Asma Hyder. It was good to listen to your discourse. I would now request Mr. Pervez Tahir to take the floor and share his views with us.
Chairperson, fellow economists and development practitioners. Well, I'm not sure whether it is the elephant in the room, madam, or it's a camel, you know. It's difficult to draw, but you know one when you see one. But that may be a problem also when we talk about social capital. Now, this concept generally, as you have now heard and probably guessed also, is basically about trust, about networks, and also an important aspect of it is reciprocity. But what has all this got to do with economic development that economists are most interested in? You saw just a table which shows that the more the trust, the greater the well-being that people have. This simple correlation has been established in now hundreds of studies. Therefore, social capital becomes important. But how do you create social capital? Where do you start? In Pakistan, actually, these days, if you have been closely following the developments, I don't think developments are taking place so fast that anybody is able to avoid the news. The news is not too good. You know, you hear terms like clash of institutions. What does it mean? You hear terms like democracy is not working. And you just heard that the magnum opus in the field of social capital is actually titled Making Democracy Work. You know, you don't just have democracy. You have to make it work. And how do you make it work? You make it work through institutions. But what are institutions? You see, an institution is very different from an organization. An institution is about rules, about things that you have to define and act and interact and network and develop trust. An organization without all this is without social capital. Now, these tools can be extended in various directions also. We have another major problem, corruption. And you hear a lot about it these days. How does social capital theory help in understanding corruption? You know, the old theory was that corruption greases the oil, which after a lot of research was rejected. That actually it stands in the way of development. It eats into human development. It takes what people expect away from them. So another theory was presented, which suggested that no, it is not greasing the oil, it sands the oil. So economists had their own way of thinking about it. First, they thought it was a principal agent problem. You know, I think as economists, you know that I don't have to talk about it. Then they concluded that no, it has something to do with collective action. Now, what does that mean? And I come back to the question I raised in the beginning. How do you create social capital? And I will use a few expressions that our people routinely use. The people say, a group of people, कि हर शख्स अपनी जगह ठीक हो जाए तो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. Now that is one way of looking at it. That people in their networks, in their memberships, as was suggested, in their interactions, in their reciprocal arrangements, sort of develop values, trust, and so on. But then the question is, which are the best networks? Mafias. Mafias are the best networks. But do they have trust? They say, actually, they're not based on trust. They're based on fear. So do you start at the micro level then? The other way of looking at it is, and that is also some people say here, कि हमारे रहनुमा ठीक हो जाएं तो सब ठीक हो जाएगा. You see, by example, and that also means, and you also heard a political leader say, I only need 200 persons and the country will be corruption-free. Now, this is another way of creating social capital from the side of the government, from the macro side, creating institutions of trust. That itself is not an easy task. I mean, the least trust that we have these days in the government institutions, which actually are organizations, not institutions. So I just wanted to raise all these questions and show the relevance of the social capital theory with our current reality, but put all this in context. The word capital is the most misused word in our literature. It just started as capital with Marx, and ever since we have been prefixing it. First physical capital, financial capital, human capital, and now social capital. Actually, we have to see the importance of all together. Thank you.
Thank you, Pervez Tahir Saab. It was a very interesting discourse. Now I have Dr. Vilayat VALIYEV from Azerbaijan. It's a great privilege for us to have him here and to benefit from his views as Azerbaijani. And I understand he intends to do a comparative account of how Azerbaijan is doing and what are the lessons and best practices from each other, Pakistan and Azerbaijan. Thank you, Dr. Vilayat.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear Chairman Naela Chohan, dear Honorable Azad Zaman, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank Councillor and heads of PIDE for inviting me to the conference. I am honored to join with you today in Islamabad, capital city of Pakistan. Pakistan is a very important country for Azerbaijan. Pakistan is the second country to recognize the independence of Azerbaijan. We will always remember Pakistan's help in our difficult time. Today I will be present to you some concept of capital, social capital, and some brief information of state current situation, social capital in Azerbaijan, as some measurement for as a conclusion and recommendation. The concept of social capital was occurred by the intersection of the politology, sociology, and economic sector of sciences. A rise of social capital concept is related with Leontief paradox. In 1947, Leontief checked the international trade model Olin Heicher for the US economy and received difficult result. The access of physical capital in the American economy has prompted Leontief put forward in idea and American exports of capital-intensive products will increase and import of labor-intensive goods will be decline. But the calculation show otherwise. The paradox has endured. Because of the high skilled workforce in the United States, its productivity has increased and the cost of goods was cheaper. As a result, export of goods with high skilled workforce has increased in US export. The explanation of the paradox put forward the importance of human capital development. Social capital firstly was introduced science by Pierre Bourdieu in 1980. According to Pierre Bourdieu, social capital consists of social relation which act of resources for getting additional benefit. The level of social capital depends on the extent to which people perceive themselves as social beings. We can explain social capital structure with diagram of Venn. Firstly, social capital when people live in national labor division. In the consideration of activities on gender in certain limited. As the second phase of social capital, when people live in the emergency and depending on public division of labor. In this case, relationship, tribes, kings, people, and nations will be public labor division and plus superstructure elements. Religion, tradition, culture, and ideology made the social superstructure elements and favorable economic growth. Development of the social relation and productivity first depend on each other, and optimal relation between them is basis of social sustainable development. The development of production factors alone cannot provide economic growth. Economic growth should be accompanied by social relation. Therefore, social relation should only be directed to the growth of prosperity. In this sense, all capital must be eventually to be converted to economic capital. It is all capital, such as culture, political, physical, all should be converted to economic capital. Also, the convergent process can take place in case of tolerance, harmony, and security. Tolerance as a social capitalist norm and activity to benefit without certain social harm. Harmony is a balanced activity of social capital appropriate to objective conditions such as socio-economic relation. Security is a social agreement like the realization of social capital. The combination of mentioned conditions which capitals great social capital and higher level capital. In this case, one for all for one. It is same of, I think, SDG strategies. Now I will provide some brief information about Azerbaijan social capital current situation. If you say Azerbaijan, after gaining independence, Azerbaijan has made radical economic reform, and this reform will be achieved in progress. Also, if you look through this diagram, in Azerbaijan economy have about 4 stages. One stage is recession period. It will be long, very short, until 1996. And then 96, 90, 2003, it will be, this Azerbaijan economy have been some stabilization period. After 2005 and until 2014, it will be rapid growth. Also, depend of oil decline oil prices, Azerbaijan economy have some recession. Now is Azerbaijan economy just starting increase. Economic growth has been in Azerbaijan with condition of national, cultural diversity and ethnic religious tolerance, multinational, multi-confessional environment. Also, Azerbaijan economy, Azerbaijan social capital can be presented with Azerbaijanism idea. According to this idea, tolerance, cultural, religion, other diversity regulated by law in this direction in Azerbaijan, in presidential and some, we establish some organization and providing some legislative acts. Also the human capital covered by these blocks. Also economic growth can be achieved by increase works and the quality of education. You know, in this diagram, Human Development Index in Azerbaijan compare average world level, just some above. Also, we provide some calculation. Research condition of Azerbaijan shows that 1% increasing or decreasing education expense and labor force of the run cases economic activity to increase or decrease about 0.4 and 2.4 respectively. If you look distribution mid-class in Azerbaijan, you know it is a mid-class social group, have some functions, it is some social stabilization role, economic stabilization role, and cultural integration role. In this regard, Azerbaijan mid-class about 50%, some down level on worldwide average indicators. Also, rich class, also poor class about 5%. Azerbaijan, in this slide, we show current situation in inter-ethnic relation in Azerbaijan. Also, situation in inter-religion situation in Azerbaijan in 2000, according to 2000 data, 2015 data, Muslims in Azerbaijan about 93%, other nation about 6%. It is many religion institutions have been registered in Azerbaijan. Also, all regulation religion by Azerbaijan law. Also, in here some slide we show education system in Azerbaijan. The education in Azerbaijan preschool, general, vocational, after diploma stage. Also, we can view here some indicators, education system in Azerbaijan end of 2016. Also, you show this some cultural health indicators of health. Also, some IKT indicators. Also, you in this mentions that social capital can operate not only positive form, but also negative. Extremism, nationalism, mafia, narcomania, and terror organization can be shown example of negative forms. For our country, Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia, it will be given as some example. At the end, I will be present to you some econometric modeling measurement of influence social capital of gross Azerbaijan economy. They are presented characteristics of this production function. Calculation shows that what we obtain such of Cobb-Douglas function for Azerbaijan economy. You show in here we give us this form model. It is providing a view system. Also in this table we show that this model is not adequate. This model is not fully adequate. Still, there is some, we can provide some outcomes. It is productivity of capital in Azerbaijan. We obtain about 2. Also, labor, productivity of labor, it was about 0.4. And finally, we can be summarize this presentation. I can be following result. Social capital notion is not formulated yet, and there is understanding problems of society. Difference of social capital from other capital is its non-measurement and non-existence on international comparison indicators. So social capital plays important role in economic growth. There is any method for measuring an impact except indicators set approach. Comparison of indicators set are not defined in international level. Some recommendation, endurance in legislative incentives for direct and mutual behaviors of class societies believes to general human principles. Given advice for activity non-formal units, some believes people improve a methodology on direct role of social capital on economic development, importance of preparing theoretical methodological conception accepted by scientific society, and social capital notion action mechanism. Broaden and propaganda, agitation, and organizational activities for understanding importance of social capital. Thank you for attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vilayat VALIYEV, for a very comprehensive discourse on social capital, and not only defining it, but also on identifying the issues and way forward. Very grateful to you, sir. Our last speaker is from OXFAM and is currently in Paris, Max Lawson. So we are going to have a video conference with him, which unfortunately we are unable to do at this moment. So I would open the floor to questions, and when we connect with Mr. Lawson, we will do so. Thank you so much. The floor is open to questions.
All right. Assalamu alaikum. I'm Dr. Huma Haq. I teach Development Studies program courses at PIDE. I have 2 questions for Dr. Asma Hyder. I'd like to, as it was pointed out by Dr. Valiyev, we have, this whole concept of social capital was put forth by Pierre Bourdieu, and he talked about social capital not in isolation. He talked about social capital, symbolic capital, and cultural capital. I'd like Dr. Hyder I'd like to hear Dr. Hyder on how, in her opinion, are all three types of these capitals, Bourdieuan capital, social, cultural, and symbolic, how are they articulated with each other, and what does this articulation do to economic development and building of trust and harmony? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Huma. I give the floor to Dr. Isma.
Thank you very much for the question and your interest in the topic. However, the author you have mentioned in your question, I haven't read him or her, but as far as the three different types you have mentioned of the capital, the social capital and symbolic, and the third one, the cultural, so they are the cultural. So these three things, even the human capital, all these are very much interrelated, and they are in not only in economics, rather sociology, which was earlier the domain of sociology, but now definitely it's domain of economics as well. And the anthropologists, psychologists, they are working on it. And as I said in the beginning of my talk, that this is the thing is that this is very complex, because all these things are highly related to each other. And it is evident from the literature that many psychologists, for instance, Daniel Kahneman, those who are working on the impact of these things into economic growth, and Alan Kruger, who is basically an economist, but he has very much recognized that these things are very much part of to understand the development process, and also and similarly the sociologist, as I mentioned, one of the sociologists which is highly cited in economic literature, Granovetter, who worked on the strength of weak ties. So one is anthropologist, other is sociologist, and then economist. So this is very much interlinked with each other. So we cannot separate, for instance, one thing from the another unless we understand the interaction and the relationship and the association between all these variables, then we can understand the development process. And the good thing is that economist has very much realized that understanding of all these concepts is important to understand the growth process, or particularly the well-being process, which is more important for economists these days. So I hope
Dr. Heather, my concern was, I just wanted to hear you on how, in your opinion, given your input in the panel, how in your opinion would all three forms of these capitals, how are they plugged into the economic development of the country? But I suppose for economists it's a new,
I would just like to give one example. Once I worked on on European social survey, which is based on European countries. So, but the thing is that we can also give an example in our case as well. Development is very much linked with the well-being. So if, for instance, we are talking about growth, that we have achieved this much percent growth, but what is the well-being or level of satisfaction of the people in society? It's more important, and it's linked with the development as well. So the OECD countries, they have developed, I'm just trying to answer your question, they have developed a very good technique to understand the well-being, and they actually divided the well-being into three different perspectives. One is which is basically the economic satisfaction, which include the employment and the income definitely, and the necessities we need. And the second type of this well-being concept is the affect, that how much you feel sad, how much you feel lonely, and how much you feel happy. So, and the third component is the eudaimonic well-being. That is basically how much you feel accomplished and you feel that you are a productive part of society. And once you merge these three type of well-beings, then it explains the level of satisfaction in society. So this is how we can actually include these three things.
Thank you, Dr. Asma Hyder. The debate was just getting heated, and it's very exciting. But we have just connected to Paris, so let's hear Max Lawson before we further continue with the debate. Thank you. So while we are connecting, I think this is a very interesting debate because like Dr. Valiev also said and Dr. Hyder also spoke of, it's intangible, but it is, as I said, the elephant in the room, and Pervez Tahir said, is it the camel? I don't know which animal, but it definitely is affecting us and it is affecting our economic growth. You could see the data that Dr. Asma Hyder had shown, which is dismal. It does affect performance, it does affect efficiency. And I would like to give the floor to Izhar Ali. He wants to throw some light on this.
Just an example from my village as a child, and an example from India, a corporate example from India. As a child, I remember that in our mohalla, our mothers used to pool milk. You know, small households, we produced very small quantities of milk. It was economically insignificant for us to pool it and make butter. So there was a system of pooling the milk, like 10 households would pool the milk. There was trust among themselves that nobody will bring milawat wala doodh and they will bring with full cream and everything. And so every household, every member of that intangible, informal cooperative would get a butter, when they pool the milk. So the same concept is being used by Amul India, okay, on a corporate scale. Amul is a huge business establishment, but the concept is the same. The fundamental basis of Amul is social capital, and it's a very good example of how economic development is rooted in social capital.
The human capital is very strong. Our diaspora as individuals is doing excellent job. But when it comes to collective action, the horizontal social capital somehow is missing. And when it comes to back home, it is also the vertical that is missing. But I would request Dr. Valiev to give his views and then Pervez Tahir to give his views. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Classification of capitals, I think this depends on some subjectivity. For example, what in development, economic development, we now classic approach capital and labor. What is how it will be we identified, evaluate the social capital impact. The social capital, it is a norm, it is a relationship, societies, group, Also, I mentioned that this social capital, usually social capital give economy positive effect. If some democracy and good relationship between social groups, so everything this will be give some positive effect. We don't calculate it, evaluate it, not directly. It is just we will calculate it across this effect. And sometimes this gives some negative effect. For example, terrorism, mafia, other. Just destroyed this all background. This should be only what is only labor and capital, not basic development economy. Should be additionally social capital.
Thank you, Dr. Valiev. Before giving any remarks on this, I'm happy to state that we are connecting to Paris. So on to Paris before we continue the debate. Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to say thank you to everyone for giving me the opportunity to speak, and apologies for the technical difficulties. I wanted to say something about the relationship between inequality and social capital and what that means for Pakistan. So first of all, I wanted to say something about the inequality crisis. So I think we need to be clear that the world is facing an inequality crisis. We have a situation where 8 men own the same wealth as the bottom 3.6 billion people. That's 8 individuals owning more wealth than the bottom half of humanity. And we know that the top 1% over the last year have got 82% of global wealth growth. So that's 82% of all new wealth is going to the top 1%. This is deeply economically inefficient, as we've heard from the International Monetary Fund and others. It's also politically corrosive in that it leads to a politics where the top 1% have enormous influence over government, and it's socially divisive. And I wanted to talk about those last two a little today, the relationship between inequality and social capital. So what do we know about inequality and social capital? We know that inequality has the power to erode and undermine social capital. It destroys trust and it destroys the bonds that we desperately need in societies for a functioning economy. We know that inequality has been linked to higher levels of crime, higher levels of social dislocation, terrorism, and other things like mental health and higher levels of imprisonment. Unequal countries are countries that have very serious social problems very often. So we know there's a very strong link between an enormous gap between the richest and the rest and the social capital on which our economies depend. So where does that leave us with Pakistan? Pakistan has high inequality, and inequality that is growing. So we have a serious problem where the top quintile, the top 20%, have 7 times more income than the bottom quintile. We also know that inequality in Pakistan is almost certainly very underestimated by official figures, because the accuracy of the measurement of top incomes is very poor in many developing countries. So the work by Thomas Piketty and others has shown us that very often in country after country, the incomes of the top 1% are significantly underestimated. So we have a serious problem of inequality in Pakistan. Also have a serious problem of the capture of political processes by wealthy elites. There's a strong relationship between that inequality of wealth and an inequality of political power and the impact that that has. And I wanted to say one thing related to that, which is that leads to the wrong policy choices at government level. So you see a situation where the investment that you would need in the social capital and the very related concept of human capital is not there. So Pakistan is very, very far behind, and this you will all know, I'm sure, but I think it's the link between these figures and social and human capital that are crucial. And 44% of your children do not go to school is a very, very high number, and we know that the majority of these are obviously young girls. And we know that the importance of human capital to equitable growth. You could describe this, I think it'd be fair to describe 44% of children out of school as the squandering of your greatest asset. Your human capital is potentially the greatest asset for developing countries, where you have a boom in young people, and it's incredibly important to ensure that they get a good education. Similarly, in terms of health, we have a situation where 1 in 12 children are dying before they reach the age of 5. Again, this is a completely preventable situation, and you have to wonder how many future engineers or future doctors have instead not made it to the age of 5, have died unnecessarily from illness or disease. And right now, how many talented young women and young men are not educated, are working in the fields, and are not helping to build a better and more equal Pakistan. So what could Pakistan do differently, and how does it contrast with other countries? OXFAM has recently produced an index where we've looked in detail at 152 countries across the world on their commitment to reducing inequality. And we look at measures including taxation and spending. And here it's very instructive to look at how Pakistan compares with other countries at a similar income level and even poorer countries. So on taxation, I think you have a tax to GDP ratio most recently at around 12.5% of GDP. That's not the lowest in the world, but it's very close to being one of the lowest in the world. So the level of tax collected, and tax is a vital part of a social contract, a vital part of a society that functions well, and the tax to GDP ratio of Pakistan is too low to secure the kinds of investments that we need. But beyond that, the way the tax is collected and the people that pay the tax is deeply
Thank you, Dr. Lawson. We are anyway running out of time now. But points made are very interesting. That is an international perspective, social inequalities, how many children are going to school. But I don't know. In my view, our culture, our traditions are our strengths also in developing that social capital. I remember a lot of time people told, oh, Pakistanis are still not a nation as a nation. But when you saw the 2005 crisis, earthquake, the government institutions had failed, but the people had stood up. And it was you beautiful young people who were going yourselves to help those people who were devastated by the earthquake. Because social capital is not tangible, not measurable, so the capitalist perspective would be to make it tangible in terms of economics and then make you realize these issues. Yes, there are issues, but there are also strengths and there are positivities in our country that I'm so proud of. So thank you all very much. I'm sorry we can't continue the debate, but it was a good learning experience, and I wish PSDE all the best. Thank you, Dr. Asad Zaman.
Rightly said, ma'am. Everything which is we cannot measure is of more importance and more things over it to debate about it. Thank you so very much, and the very useful session, great insights. Now I would request Ma'am Naela Chohan to please give souvenirs to our guests. Mr. Izhar Ali Hunza. Dr. Vilayat VALIYEV.
Thank you so much,
Dr. Pervez Tahir. I would request someone from OXFAM to receive the shield on behalf of Max Lawson. I request Dr. Asad Zaman to please give us a winner to Ma'am Naela Chohan. Thank you all the panelists, chairperson, all the people for your patience.